Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
All right, Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, Lincoln, Kia, Hyundai. Great new inventory. Also, great pre-owned inventory. If that's what your budget says and what you prefer, great. It is Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Time now for our play-by-play call of the day.
Climbing the ladder. Rizzo's got it. Cubs win. Cubs win the final tonight, 9-3. Javi's back. Good start to the road trip, and congrats to the Cubs organization. 11,000 wins.
Second all-time to get there. Phillies have 10,000 losses. The Cubs have 11,000 wins. Is that bad?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay. All right, let's get to Neal Coolong. And on this particular show, where sometimes mediocrity reigns, Neal Coolong is there to save it. Neal, welcome.
That's a good one. You put some time and effort into that. The pleasure is certainly all on my end. I continue to fool you week after week into letting me come back.
I'll freely admit I just made that up on the spot.
That's the work of a pro's pro. The highest compliment one can receive.
There you go. Thank you, sir. All right. So, quick Steeler camp update. How are they doing so far?
Well, today they're getting their traveling legs in. They're going to move from Heinz Field back to the South Side facility. I didn't hear a reason why. There was a rash of thunderstorms that went through last night, and there are some coming through this morning or this afternoon as well. Maybe that has something to do with it. But they closed it to the media, so not really much happening there, I don't think, as far as we can hear. But we did get the long-awaited interview time with the legendary T.J. Watt. If you ask Steelers fans,
yes,
he's been a 10-year Hall of Fame player already.
Yes.
We're excited to see what new heights he can reach this season, and he seems excited about it as well. So that's the bulk of it today. It looks like it's going to be kind of a quiet day, but. I think the biggest takeaway to this point, we haven't really heard anything negative. Maybe that's by design. I think people kind of expected to not hear a whole lot of negative, but you have to like what you've seen. It seems like the pieces are the pieces that they've kind of scattered across the table are finding their homes now. This was a team, keep in mind, that had all the accusations of the world as far as locker room issues, character concerns, leadership issues. It really seems like all of that has kind of died away, and the group of newer guys that they've brought in have found their roles on the team are growing into that. This is a topic that's come up a lot this week. You look at how much hype a player like Watt gets, and rightfully so. I joke around about it, but he's an excellent player. Minkah Fitzpatrick as well. We're not talking at all about the leaps and bounds improvement that we saw from Devin Bush from the first half of the season to the second. How good is he going to be in his second year now that he's got another training camp under his belt? What's Bud Dupree's ceiling like? We heard Keith Butler talk about this the other day. He's a player who comes in and plays. He had some injury concerns early on, in his career, but he's gotten steadily better, and now he's in a contract year. I don't think the Steelers are going to be able to keep him long term, but he's playing for his job next season, and he's going to play for a lot of money. You have to expect he's going to have a high output. They have a lot of pieces that are coming into place now, and I think this is really what Kevin Colbert masterminded when he wanted to put together kind of one last run with the high-level quarterback, and that really kind of seems to be most of the question than anything else. They've got the defense now. This might be the most talented defense Ben Roethlisberger has ever had. So can they put the rest of it together now?
We've heard some positive reports about Marcus Allen in camp. Have you heard some of the same?
With Allen, it's interesting because I don't think leading into this camp he would have gotten much attention at all.
Right.
He's been around, but the Steelers have always kept kind of that reserve safety who's been around, who knows their system well. But from what I've gathered of it, there are people that are saying he looks more confident, he looks more improved than he has in the past. And this isn't a team that's great on depth at safety. They have a ton of marquee premium dollars put into the top two spots, but the third safety has always been a primary special teams guy, and he's always found a way to get on the field one way or another. And I think they expect that from Allen. It's not even a hope that he can turn that corner. They expect him to be that, and he's been around long enough. You have to kind of think like, well, yeah, they would have gone after a veteran, especially among the safety market. They would have gone after a veteran if they didn't think that Allen was going to be their guy. I think you have to kind of pencil him in now and say he's going to be a key special teams guy, and the needed depth that they have to have at that position. Not only do you have to play teams, but you got to be ready to fill in a couple snaps here and there, or in the legacy of Ryan Mundy from back in the day, a guy that he followed the same path that Allen has. He was a nobody fringe roster guy for a bit. People know him from the area, of course, and he grew himself into a starter. He didn't just start here. He played for a bit with the Bears as well. He had a nice little career for as long as it took him to get on the field. He made the most of it. I think there are a lot of people that are saying Allen could be that type of guy, ends up with the Steelers for the length of his contract and perhaps a year or two extension beyond that.
This is his third year, by the way, with the team. Artie Burns, I just wanted to keep the winning streak going that he gets mentioned on your segment. So just thought I'd throw it in there.
You need a bell. Ding.
Ding. The 77 false positives, what was the reaction around there to that? Because when it first came out about 77, I think some people sat back and went, whoa, and then all of a sudden they went, who? Okay. So what was the reaction down there about that?
It's interesting. I've heard a couple things on this. The reaction, first and foremost, from people was false negative, that were false positive. To have that many right away out of nowhere, they really didn't believe it, or at the very least, they're selling the idea that they didn't believe it. Right. And to me, it almost kind of seems, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but the NFL's numbers don't match up with national averages. At this point, to not have any player at all having tested, it does seem a little bit strange. At the same time, though, if you think about it, just from like an organizational standpoint, an assembly line standpoint, there has to be something at some point that's going to kind of go wrong, and maybe that's what this was for the lab that was testing everything. Something gets twisted out of whack or whatever, and the report is going to come back. They're hoping to err on the side of caution and say that this is a positive test instead of a negative one, because flipping it around would be a lot worse. I think they expect to some degree this is going to happen, but a lot of people are jumping immediately to how often is it reversed? Is this going to happen the Friday before a game? And in some extreme cases said kind of tongue-in-cheek, what's Belichick going to do when he finds out how to weaponize this? Things like that I think are expected in a new, unfamiliar process like they're going to have. But it does kind of, raise your eyebrow a little bit. How would they handle something like this in season? They're going to have to get very fast answers on a lot of things, and are they going to say immediately, just for the sake of everything, that this is a false positive right away and try to figure it out after the game? I think most teams would prefer to do that. just for the sake of competition. They'll deal with it after the game if they have to deal with it. But by and large, it being an issue, I'm not sure if that's I don't want to say a priority, but I wouldn't think most teams are going to look at this point in camp and say, we know enough about it to not have to worry about it. We still kind of have to figure out how we're going to handle ourselves in the event that this happens. And this is kind of a dry run for us to do it.
How difficult is it going to be to make cuts in a camp with no preseason game?
We were talking about this among my colleagues the other day. With the new rules that are being put in place, with the amount of guys that they have in camp, they're really not cutting a whole lot of people anyway.
Right, I know.
The rosters are massive in comparison to what they've been in the past. So they didn't bring in a whole lot of guys in the first place, it's because, or they made a lot of cuts right away, and it's probably trimming the fat. These were guys here because we need the third-string quarterback to throw to some receivers who aren't dead tired. So here's some guys to fill out the team when we're giving the veterans a rest. We're not going to do all that this year, so these guys can go just right off the bat. I think they know what their team is better now than they did, and that's even without preseason games. It kind of makes you wonder, the league certainly wouldn't want to discuss these types of things, but we've talked about the necessity of preseason games.
Right.
If they had expanded in-season rosters, and I say roster, of course, I don't mean the 53. I'm talking about the massive-sized practice squad they have now.
Yeah.
5 years ago, there were 8 guys in the practice squad. Now there's going to be 16, and they can protect 4 from week to week.
Yeah.
You have a mini team now. Before, it was really just kind of like, well, we can't cut everybody in case of injury. Understandably, they're going to have more, and they're going to keep more. To me, and from a news perspective, I think this is where the story really goes. It's not so much about the 53 anymore. Now it's going to be about the practice squad.
Right.
How many of these guys are you bringing in? Who are you protecting and why? And the reason for that is because the rules of who can be on the practice squad have flipped. They can put anybody they want now. So it really isn't even a practice squad. This is just kind of an extension of a 53-man roster put under the title and the nomenclature that they're used to, probably for the sake of payment. They don't want to give them, the full share of what they would get if they were on the 53-man roster, because they're not going to be active on game days, but they can't sign anywhere else either. I mean, it's sort of a something you'd think the union would have an issue with if they wanted to extend it beyond this season. But it does make sense in a lot of ways, and long way of getting back to the original question. I think the decision to cut, really, to me, it just doesn't seem like it's going to be all that difficult, because you have this entire layer of backups now to fight that out. Now, if you're on the fringe of that backup role, I don't know what to say except stay close, because one injury goes down, we've got plenty of room to add people that we know. Nobody else has really scouted us. We don't have an opportunity to give out film on any of the players we have, so this is the most obvious place for you. I think there are going to be the most transactions we've seen in probably in a September period. Yeah. Usually there are a ton, especially after the first week when salaries are no longer guaranteed. We're going to see a ton of guys moving and coming off of this kind of life raft of the practice squad setup that they have now.
Any report on how Chase Claypool's done?
That's also a subject that came up. It's really interesting.
I feel like I'm in your staff meeting.
You may as well be. You probably need some help. The buzz, the camp darling, this was always kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke that I've had at a couple of different places that I've been in my career, where fans just go absolutely nuts for that diamond in the rough. Now, the Steelers, I think, have more of a reason to do that than any other team. This is a team that had a Defensive Player of the Year come from a guy that they cut 3 times prior who wasn't drafted. Right. They've had, I don't know how many running backs come from absolutely nowhere and end up all-pro status. You keep an eye on these fringe guys, these practice squad candidates. Yeah. And we kind of made a joke out of it that we ended up calling the Isaac Redman Award, just because Isaac Redman, the former Steelers running back, he received Walter Payton-level accolades for his performance in training camp and the preseason. And he was a good player. He made the team. He had a nice little career. It's just more that the fans get so into these nobodies, and then they start to write a narrative of a player that there's no possible way this guy could be this overlooked, but you with your sharp eye on Twitter can identify this guy as an all-pro player. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, and what makes it even more fun is the fact that they don't even understand that it's sarcasm. They think it's a legitimate thing. So you nominate all these these fringe guys, and the rules back in the day where he has to be later than a 6th-round pick or later. Undrafted, he can only have been on the list one time before. Things like that.
Drew Pearson.
Yeah, the good comparison. Now, the modern age, we'll call him one of probably 5,000 different players, but Drew Pearson, people probably didn't even realize that back in the day. Yeah. They probably just completely missed the guy in the scouting process at the beginning. But the training camp darling this year is the team's first draft pick. Yeah. So why is that? Because, God bless her, Teresa Varley's doing 90% of the reporting that certainly the non-mainstream media, the blogs and the sites are reporting on. It's coming from the team. Today, for example, what they told us is, we'll turn you away at the door at Heinz Field. You can't attend practice today, but we'll send you a practice camp report. I don't know if you guys see those or not, but the notes are written just like the Isaac Redman report would. Chase Claypool had a great shoestring catch along the sideline that Ben Roethlisberger, whose elbow is feeling great, felt really good about it at the time. It's just like, wow, this is unbelievable. You guys are just doing this for us.
And there's nothing in the report about any drops.
Nope, not a thing. No. It's all completely positive, and you only hear about the same people.
It's like it's like watching a recruiting highlight tape. You never see anybody miss a jump shot, and you never see a receiver drop a ball.
Without the fancy graphics and the hip hop music in the background, it's a highlight.
Yeah,
so what you get, I hear Frank laughing about. He knows what I mean. That's internet scouting at its finest. You get in with the culture.
Oh yeah.
But it really, for me, I'm sure that there is the legitimate Isaac Redman all-star candidate out there at camp right now that we're not hearing about because, the Steelers media department, I'm poking fun at them. They're great people. They're doing their job. Everybody's in a real tough spot. I understand that. The idea that we're not able to see everything that's going on doesn't sit well with me. I don't think there's a way around it, but I'm sure Chase Claypool's doing really well. I didn't have doubts that he would, kind of be a sensational against air kind of receiver. If you watch his game tape, I don't think even Mike Tomlin, who's kind of passing out rare accolades for a rookie, I don't think he expects him to get on the field a ton and match up to the hype that's being built for him now. No. He's not ready to play at that level. And the reason I say that is not because I don't think he's a phenomenally talented athlete. Very rare size for his physical ability. He's tantalizing. I didn't expect them to take Chase Claypool in the second round. That's not the guy I thought they would have taken. But I definitely see why they did. It's a great second-round pick. The same reasons I said Juju was a great second-round pick. I see why they're taking him. But Juju, just for one example, far more ready to play his rookie year than Claypool is. And people won't agree with me, and I'm not a Notre Dame fan. I'm not a Notre Dame hater. But I'll say this. You and I talked. I remember talking with you about this last year. I hated Miles Boykin coming into the NFL. I'm really not a fan of him. Right. And you saw it his rookie year. He can do one thing. He can run straight. He can't cut. He can't break. He looks like a battleship. While I think Claypool is a better prospect, they are very similar athletically. So for me, it's not all that dissimilar than Martavis Bryant was coming out. Another very high ceiling guy he literally didn't get on the field for the first 7 games or 6 games or whatever it was because he didn't have another route. At that point, they needed a guy that could run one route. They were really struggling early on in 2014 offensively and very inconsistent. And he provided that vertical element that they really needed because they had a lot of skill everywhere else. He brought a lot of that for them, but they couldn't put him out there until he could do more than one thing and show an opposing defense that he could do more than one thing. I think Claypool is further along than Bryant was, and they will get him on the field. But if you're talking about the 3 receiver set and you're talking about the split end position, I'm not taking James Washington off the field for Claypool right now. Washington looks really good. Washington had a great season, highly underrated season, considering what he had to go against. He had a better season than Deontay Johnson did. You know, he's a good player. They're both good players. Add Juju in there. They have a strong, 3-deep receiver chart right now. I don't think you need to force Claypool onto the field. I mean, certainly if you're down 6 with 6 seconds to go at the 50-yard line, put Claypool on the field. But for what they're going to try to do between the 20s, he's not going to be your guy right away. I see him kind of a 30-catch, maybe 400, 450-yard guy right away. But he's going to grow, and he's going to be a really good player down the line. It's just not going to be immediately.
Anybody else we would put in this time slot would end up becoming Isaac Redman. Not you. You're the first teamer. Thank you, sir.
It's great to know because I've talked to Isaac Redman about it before, and he kind of was just like, I hate it and I love it at the same time. I think it's great, but it's what I did not want people to say about me, although I'm happy to get the recognition for it. So it really fulfilled its own prophecy. It was good.
You are no Isaac Redman.
Thank you. I appreciate it, guys.
Neal Coolong, back with more in a moment. Brought to you by Sunbury Motors on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Taking your calls at 800-795-9565. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
All right, Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia. Routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf and online at sunburymotors.com. The great pre-owned inventory to go with the outstanding new inventory, which, of course, includes Ford, Lincoln, Kia, Hyundai. Fabulous service department as well. It's a great time to make a deal. Have you noticed there are a couple things? Home sales and car sales have been going through the roof. It's unbelievable. Amazing. All right. Great to have you with us. So what are the Raptors and the Detroit Lions going to do? The Lions are not going to be practicing, so they decided not to practice today. And the Raptors are threatening to not play the opening game of their playoff series with the Celtics. That sound right?
Correct.
Wow. This is over the shooting incident in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Now, I would comment about the shooting incident in Kenosha, Wisconsin, but I know very little about it. So it would be wrong of me to make a comment one way or the other. I would guess that you know more than I do.
I'm looking more into it now, but I know the basic details is that there was a black man was shot by police as police were responding to a domestic violence incident, and the black man was getting into his car. There were 3 children inside, and police shot him, and then his dad mentioned today to the Chicago Sun-Times that he's now paralyzed from the waist down, but they don't know if it's permanent or not.
Right. Was there some claim that there's no body cam footage?
Not that I've seen so far. I'm skimming through the story right now just to make sure I didn't miss any other details, but not that I know of.
And did somebody say something about the possibility there was a knife? I mean, again, these are all things I don't know. So, I mean, I'm trying to play catch up here. Well, all I know is that there's possibility it's going to have an effect on sports. because for the simple reason that you are already getting threats from the sports world of either not practicing or even not playing to show how strongly they feel about it. And again, I have no idea. What I know about it is so limited.
Yeah, according to CBS, Kenosha police don't have body cameras, but do have body microphones.
Okay.
It was captured from across the street on a video that was posted online. Happened at 5 o'clock Sunday.
Okay. All right.
Police don't know whether Blake was armed or why police opened fire.
Right. Well, as of right now, Toronto is still scheduled to play Boston tomorrow night. Now, the question will be, do they? And the Lions are not practicing today. Luka Doncic, by the way, plays again tonight. Just so you know, once you mark that down.
Thank you.
I wanted to give you a reason to live. And your guy Lionel Messi leaving Barcelona. As Dick Girardi would say, Messi, go on. All right, so let's see. Let's get to what's going on. NBA, Utah, Denver tonight. Utah leads the series 3-1. Dallas and the Clippers, 9 o'clock game, TNT. Series tied at 2. 7 o'clock, Bruins and Tampa Bay. And Vegas against Vancouver. Those are the 2 games tonight. Major League Baseball, the Astros lead the Angels 5-0. The game in the bottom of the second inning in Houston. By the way, Albert Pujols now second all-time at RBIs behind only Babe Ruth. Miami and the Mets. The Mets return to action tonight. They'll play, I think they're playing 2 tonight. It's a 5 o'clock start this evening. Phillies and Washington on Eagle 107 gets going at 5:30 this evening. The Red Sox take their sterling juggernaut to Buffalo to take on the Blue Jays. Yankees in Atlanta tonight. Minnesota against Cleveland. Oakland against Texas. Kansas City will take on St. Louis. There's also MLS action tonight. In fact, 5 matches in MLS this evening. All at home sites. Let's see, who's pitching for your Yankees tonight? Let's see, your team. Garrett Cole tonight against Ian Anderson. So the Yankees are on the verge of their 17th win before they even started.
Yeah, it better be a dub tonight.
Yeah. Let's see. The Phillies, who do not have Garrett Cole, they tried, but they don't have him. Jake Arrieta tonight. McCutchen, Hoskins, Harper, Realmuto, Gregorius, Segura, Alec Boehm, who, by the way, homered the other day. Deep home run. Roman Quinn, Scott Kingery. That's the lineup tonight.
And the Phils have also determined, Steve, the 5th rotation, and they're going to give it to Spencer Howard. Vinny V going to the bullpen.
Yeah, Spencer Howard struggled first time out, including getting a blister. Great prospect. Phillies are 10-14. The Nationals are 11-15. And did you see that? My understanding is ESPN is now going to put out, as one of its shows, a show surrounding gambling. This is going to be the wagering part of this is going to be a part of the formula that keeps certain outlets alive. Okay? Just the way it is. And I don't care whether it's DraftKings, FanDuel, or getting locked up with Vegas casinos, because ESPN is opening a studio in Las Vegas. Brand new studio. Up and running. It overlooks, I want to say it overlooks Caesar's Palace, I believe. Their Vegas studio will have content for sports gambling, both Daily Wager and a second digital show. And segments filmed at the studio will be debuting on the air today from their Vegas studio. Daily Wager will return to ESPN2's airwaves on September 8th, 2 days before the start of the NFL season. Doug Kazarian will be the one hosting it. The Vegas studio, once the pandemic begins to fade, ESPN has long-term deals with both Top-Ranked, boxing, and UFC. Both companies are based and hold their events in Vegas. More NFL and NHL content because of the Vegas Golden Knights and the Raiders. Sports gambling is going to be one of the keys financially to keeping some elements afloat, I think, before more businesses can get back on track, I think. I mean, it's there. To be honest with you, what's interesting about ESPN? They keep building these studios in various places. Okay, I get it. But the key is to have boots on the ground. Right now, you have a lot of reporters, both in news and sports, that are doing reports from their living rooms. They make a couple phone calls, they put together a report. I realize it's a pandemic, so I understand that. But you can't stick with that model. Once some sense of normalcy returns, you've got to have boots on the ground. And what's interesting, I'll give you one. I know it was completely limited this year for obvious reasons. But Peter King still got the 8 training camps. Well, I'm reading his column this morning about all the places that he went, including Kansas City, Nashville, and so forth. Well, if you're physically there, it's the amount of information you get is remarkable. And it's so beneficial to the viewer, the listener, the reader. I mean, I know I told this story before, but it's worth repeating in my opinion. And it's the story I told about George Lapidus, Memphis statesman, also worked in talk radio in Memphis for 40-plus years. He was inducted into the U.S. Basketball Writers Hall of Fame in 2014, the same year that Dick Girardi went in. So I'm there in Dallas for the ceremony, the breakfast, and the speeches. Because I'm there obviously for Dick. It was great because Dave Jones was there as well. And George Lapidus gets up there and he's making his speech. I never forgot this because I told my class about this yesterday, and I always make sure I tell every class this story. He's working on the Memphis City beat, so it's like Matt, going to the Shikellamy School Board, or Matt going over to the Borough Council meeting in Sealands Grove, or whatever it may be, okay? And that's what he was doing. And he had developed great rapport with the mayor of Memphis, and he developed great rapport with several members of the Memphis City Council. One day, the editor of the newspaper calls him in and says, "Hey, we need to switch you over to sports." I said, "Geez, I don't really want to do that." He said, I really like what I'm doing. I'm really comfortable at it. Editor took out a piece of paper, wrote something in the paper, handed it to him. It was a number. George Lapidus looked at the number and said, "What day do you want me to start on sports?" So he switches over to sports. The first event they send George Lapidus out to cover after he takes the job is the Masters at Augusta National. He's there in the information tent, the media tent, and he sees the legendary writer Red Smith. For older members of our audience, you know exactly what I'm talking about, all those great years of the New York Times. For younger people, look it up. You will find the name Red Smith is synonymous with the greats of sports journalism. So he sees Red Smith, figures he'd give it a shot. He walks over to him. He says, "Mr. Smith, my name is George Lapidus with the Memphis Statesman. It's my first time covering the Masters, really the first time I'm covering sports." He said, "What advice would you have for me as I go through my career covering sports?" And Red Smith looked at him and he said, 2 words, "Be there." That's the key to the best reporting out there. You have to have the ability to turn a phrase. You have to have the ability to understand what's important. You have to have the ability to cut through some of the muck to get to the facts, the truth, and so forth. You have to have the ability to do that, but you can really only do that if you're actually there. And in journalism right now, both news and sports, because of the pandemic, people are all getting a little relaxed, saying, "Hey, we can actually do this without actually going anywhere." The ones that suffer from a philosophy like that are the viewers, the listeners, and the readers. They're the ones that suffer because if you're not out there being there, picking up information, picking up tidbits, getting a feel for what's going on, figuring out what's important, instead of having some source feed you something while you're sitting in your living room and then reporting on it, you have to get your hands dirty in this business. I don't care if it's something as benign as covering a football team on an everyday basis or a basketball team on an everyday basis. If you're there, so people ask me, "Why do you go to practice every day?" Because I said, you never know what's going to happen. And right now, with the pandemic, people are finding out, well, geez, we can do our job like this. We don't have to be there. Well, to be honest with you, you're not getting the straight skinny on virtually anything right now because very few people, quote, are there anymore. We've got to transition that back once this pandemic slows down to getting people out there and actually in the field that are close to stories, because not every story goes through New York, not every story goes through Washington, not every story goes through Bristol, Connecticut, but most go through Sunbury. We'll come back with more in a moment on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
When it comes to car buying, there's the other guy's way, and then there's the SMC way. The other guys force you into a vehicle you really don't want. The Sunbury Motors way lets you take the time you need to browse, ask questions, and take the test drive and think on it. For over 100 years, the Mertz family and all their employees have made your experience the most pleasant one you'll ever have. The other guys won't offer you the best price for your trade, no matter how much they say they will. The SMC way is their promise to provide you with the most money the market shows your vehicle is worth. The SMC way is to offer you all applicable factory rebates on new vehicles and generous discounts. Looking for a pre-owned vehicle? The SMC way checks each vehicle in a 200-mile radius to determine the lowest price, then beat it. It's the lowest price promise, just part of the SMC way. The choice is up to you, the other guy's way or the SMC way. The SMC way wins every time. Sunbury Motors Company in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury, and at sunburymotors.com. Selling more cars and satisfying more customers for over 100 years.
So, is Shikellamy going to play high school football this year?
Yep. They'll start on the 11th.
I know they'll be getting intense pressure from one individual.
Yep, Central Mountain's the opening game on the 11th.
Yeah, I got a lot of time on Friday nights. Maybe I'll pop by, catch a game.